Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for connecting me with an audience and being able to share the importance of sleep. It's lovely.
Yeah, you're always right. You're obsessed with sleep. I'm pretty obsessed with sleep. And, if I don't get enough sleep, I feel so bad. I mean, I feel like very guilty that I didn't have enough sleep. And I
Yeah.
think this is such a big part of our life, and it should be even a bigger part. And many people just don't understand the importance of sleep. And I think, oh yeah, we're young and, don't have to sleep. And I mean, it's also true that the time before midnight is very essential as well. So I think it's really cool if you would, first of all, describe why you're obsessed with sleep, and how did it come that you dived into this whole science of sleep, which I find so interesting. And, why is it so important? What happens during night, during the sleep? How do we enhance and rejuvenate our bodies, and what's so important about it?
Yeah, great question. So maybe I can start with how I got into sleep to begin with. I think most of us as sleep researchers were all accidental sleep researchers. Nobody, when you are 5 or 6 years old in the classroom and they say, what would you like to be when you grow up? No one puts their hand up and says, I want to be a sleep researcher. So we all fall into it by accident. I did. I was measuring brainwave patterns of people with dementia for my PhD. And I started to realize that they had really significant sleep problems. And I was measuring their brainwave activity when they were awake. And I thought, well, maybe there are bigger differences when I measure their brain activity when they're asleep. So I started measuring sleep. And at that point, I realized, and that was 20 years ago, a very simple question could not be answered, which was, why do we sleep? And at that point, the best answer that everyone had was the reason that we sleep is to cure sleepiness, which is largely useless
Yeah,
as
yeah.
an answer. So I wanted to address that question, and I fell in love with sleep. And it's been a 20-year love affair, and I'm still trying to answer that question. The question still fascinates me, but in the past 20 years, a little bit of my work, but mostly from other great scientists in the field, we've learned so much about sleep. And in fact, we've now had to change the question. No longer do we have to ask, what is sleep good for? Instead, we have to ask, is there anything in the brain or the body that isn't enhanced by sleep when we get it, or detrimentally impaired when we don't get enough? And the answer seems to be no. So that's been my sort of journey into sleep. And I would also say that in response to your second question, how can we think about sleep and what it does for us? I think the simplest way to answer that would be to say, sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health each and every day. There is no major organ system of the body, and there is no operation of the mind that isn't wonderfully enhanced by sleep when we get it, or demonstrably impaired when we don't get enough.
It's like charging your phone in a way.
It really is. And it's, you can think of sleep almost like your life support system. It
Yeah.
is Mother Nature's best effort at immortality.
So if we don't get enough sleep, our brain functions are not the same. Our memory is not working the same. We don't transport the memory in our long-term memory. Our immune system basically shuts down dramatically. There's so much negativity to it. How can we figure out personally how much sleep we need? And would you say everybody needs 8 hours and that's it? Because some people just tell me, oh, I sleep 5 hours, I'm good. It's
Yeah.
how can we figure it out for each one of us?
So there is a range. You're absolutely right, and the recommendation right now is somewhere between 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night for most adults. Once you start to drop below 7 hours, that's when we can measure impairments in your brain function and also your body.
Yeah.
One of the problems, and the reason that when people say that to me as well, very often, I can survive on 5 hours or less. The danger there, and what we've discovered, is that your subjective sense your opinion of how well you're doing with too little sleep is a miserable predictor of objectively how you actually are performing. So
Yeah.
the analogy would be a drunk driver at a bar. You know, they've had 6 or 7 drinks, they pick up their car keys and they say to you, I feel fine to drive home.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm
Right.
good. And your response is, no, no, no. I know that you think you're fine, but trust me, objectively, you're not good to drive. It's the same way with sleep. We don't know we're sleep deprived when we're sleep deprived. So less than 5 hours or 5 hours or less is really insufficient. We know that it comes with a marked increased risk of cardiovascular disease, of diabetes, of obesity, of Alzheimer's disease, and we can talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
Stroke, as well as depression, anxiety, suicidality, and also certain forms of cancer because of an impairment in your immune system. So I think
So anxiety. Yeah. Sorry. You go ahead.
yes, yeah, well, I was just going to say that I think the recommendation is between 7 to 9 hours. And the second question that you asked, which was a very elegant one, how do we know if we're getting enough? And there's lots of different signs. I think the most simple one would be to say, if you use an alarm clock to wake up in the morning and the alarm didn't go off, would you sleep past that alarm? And if the answer is yes, then your body is and your brain is not done sleeping yet. It still
Right.
needs more. There's other more subtle symptoms. If you are irritable, if you have anxiety, if you are using caffeine throughout the day to keep you awake and you feel as though you can't function without caffeine, then you are self-medicating your state of sleep deprivation. And then also hunger. There's a very strong relationship between sleep and your craving for food, what type of food you like, and also your hunger levels. And so if you find yourself not being satisfied with what you're eating and you're not getting sufficient sleep, that's a good sign as well. So that's a lot of information. I hope that's not too much.
Also, when you're tired, you're hungry. No, you try to compensate tiredness with food. And also, do you think coffee per se should be cut off, or coffee after a certain hour? Because people say, you know, I need a coffee in the morning. Me personally, I drink a coffee in the morning because otherwise I get headaches. But then I don't. But some people, they drink espresso at night, and this definitely disturbs your sleep, right?
It does. So I don't want to be puritanical. You know, life is to be lived, and I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their life. I'm just here to tell you about sleep, inform you about the science, and then you can make your choices in life. And in terms of coffee, there are actually some health benefits to coffee if you look at the data. So I definitely wouldn't say don't drink coffee. I think it's fine to drink coffee in the morning, but try to cut caffeine off at around about midday. Try not to drink caffeine in the afternoon or evening. And the reason is caffeine has what we call a half-life of about 5 to 6 hours. In other words, after 5 to 6 hours, 50% of the caffeine is still in your brain and body. That means that caffeine has a quarter life of between 10 to 12 hours. Why am I telling you this? Well, if you have a cup of coffee at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, that's the equivalent of getting into bed, let's say at midnight, and when you turn the light out, and you swig a quarter of a cup of coffee, and then you try to get to bed. It's not going to work. So a quarter of that caffeine is still in your brain at midnight if you have coffee at 2. So, and we know that caffeine can disrupt not just how easy it is to fall asleep and also disrupt how hard it is to stay asleep, but caffeine can also decrease the amount of deep sleep that you have. And this is why when people say, I have an espresso with dinner in the evening and I fall asleep fine and I stay asleep, even if that's true, you may not be going into deep sleep. And when you wake up the next morning, you don't feel refreshed or restored by that.
This is the same with alcohol. You know, when you drink alcohol in the evening, it's easy to fall asleep, but then you have a very superficial sleep and you don't get into the sleep, and then you feel it in the morning as well. So alcohol is this same example in a way.
Yeah, alcohol is another problematic People use it as a sleep aid, but it's actually not a sleep aid. It's very detrimental. Most people think if I have a little, drink just in the evening, it helps me fall asleep. It's actually not true. Alcohol is in a class of drugs that we call the sedatives. And sedation is not sleep. But when you have a drink in the evening, you mistake the sedation to think that it's sleep. So that's the first problem. You're not going into natural sleep with alcohol. The second problem is alcohol will make your sleep very fragmented. So you wake up lots of times throughout the night. And then the third problem with alcohol is that it can block your REM sleep, what we call dream sleep,
Right.
which is a critical type of sleep for things like emotional and mental health. And also the less and less REM sleep that you have, the higher and higher your mortality risk. So firstly, there's not one stage of sleep that's most important. All stages of sleep are critical. They do different things at different times of night, but you're absolutely right with alcohol. Again, I don't want to sound, if people
No,
would
but
like
it's
a drink
important.
every now
I
and
think
again,
it's
that's
important
great.
to
But
know.
yeah.
I think it's really important to know. And I think people are really aware of our health, immune system, and they want to learn. And if we cannot learn, then we don't know how to protect ourselves. So I think it's important to really speak out. And as you said, and I always explain like you, I want to just show you what happens, and then you make the choices yourself. But I think it's
Yeah.
really important to understand what the science is and what happens, so then we can adjust our life to that. So another thing I really talk a lot about is inflammation, how inflammation destructs tissue and is crucial for your overall health, and obviously also the skin. And it has a lot to do with sleep, and especially in stressful times, and when we have like a rising of cortisol levels, it also interferes with our sleep rhythm, and it causes even more inflammation. So it's like a vicious cycle. Same with anxiety. We have anxiety, can't sleep, but then we don't sleep and get even more anxiety. So how, sorry for so many questions, but how can we get into, if we are in this vicious cycle, and how can we get back to a good night's sleep? And I think this is something so many people are asking, and I know myself, so many people have problems with sleeping, and we want to know, of course, how to fix it and how to get back into normal sleep habits.
Yeah, so lots of great questions. And to firstly come back to sleep and the immune system, there is a very intimate relationship between your sleep health and your immune health. Those two things go hand in hand. So for example, we know that if you are sleeping less than 7 hours a night, you are 3 times more likely to catch a cold, to become infected by the rhinovirus during flu season. We also know that women who are sleeping 5 hours or less a night are 70% more likely to develop pneumonia, which of course is a very relevant condition considering the COVID situation right now. We also know if you're not getting sufficient sleep in the week before you get your flu shot, you produce less than 50% of the normal antibody response, rendering that flu shot significantly less effective. And so as soon as you start to short sleep, your immune system implodes across multiple levels. And this is the reason why, if you've been getting sick a lot and you speak to your parents, your father or your mother will say, you've been getting sick a lot. Are you sleeping enough? And everyone knows it's true, but science supports that. It's also critical for the skin. You're absolutely right. And I think we sometimes forget that the skin is not just about, our appearance and feeling confident and having that important confidence. The skin is the biggest sense organ that we have of the body. And it's also the first line defense against immune attack. We are cocooned in this beautiful membrane that we call the skin. And if we don't take care of it by way of sleep or just being mindful of its health, we can break down the first line defense against infection very quickly. So I think that's hopefully a very quick introduction to how critical sleep is for immune health. How do we get better sleep? I think there are probably 6 things that people can do tonight to start trying to sleep better. Now, these these sound like rules, but I don't want to give them as rules because people don't respond to rules. People respond to reasons. They don't respond to rules. So I'll try and explain each one of the rules. The first is regularity. So go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, no matter whether it's the weekend or the weekday. And regularity is critical. It will anchor your sleep and it will improve the quantity and the quality of that sleep. And the reason is because deep in the middle of our brain, we have a 24-hour rhythmic clock, and it controls lots of things, things like release of hormones, our appetite, but also our sleep-wake cycle. And if you give it regularity, that's when it responds best. That's how it operates best under conditions of regularity. So going to bed and waking up at the same time. The second thing is darkness. We are a dark, deprived society in this modern era, and we need darkness at nighttime to release another hormone called melatonin to help time the healthy onset of our sleep. So in the last hour before bed, try to dim down half of the lights in your apartment or your home. And then also try to stay away from digital devices in the last 45 minutes or so. And then reverse that in the morning. It's critical that we get natural daylight in the first half of the day. So try to sit next to a window or go out for 20 minutes. Even on a cloudy day, it's still important to get natural daylight. So you can use both of those. The third critical thing is temperature. It turns out that we need to drop our core body temperature by about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 1 degree Celsius, to fall asleep and then to stay asleep. And it's the reason that you will always find it easier to fall asleep in a room that's a little bit too cold than too hot, because too hot is taking you in the wrong direction for good sleep. Too cold is actually taking you in the right direction. So aim for a bedroom temperature of somewhere between 65 to 68 degrees. It sounds cold, and it's okay to wear socks or have a hot water bottle at the end of the bed for your feet, but try to get it cold. So that's the third rule. The fourth rule is something that I call walk it out. And what I mean by this is don't stay in bed awake for too long. So if you've been trying to fall asleep and it's 25 minutes later, or you've tried to fall back asleep after 25 minutes, don't stay in bed. Get out of bed and just go to a different room, and in dim light, just read a book or a magazine. And then only go back to bed when you're sleepy. And the reason is this: your brain is an incredibly associative device. And if you lie in bed awake, quickly your brain learns that being in bed is the place where you're awake, not asleep. And so every time you go into the bedroom, you feel this alertness, you feel awake. And that's why people will tell me, I'm watching television in the evening.
That's not good. Television in the bedroom, right?
Television is not good in the bedroom, but outside of the bedroom, it's fine. But people will say, you know, I'm watching television on the couch
And I fall asleep.
and I'm falling asleep, but then I get into bed and I'm wide awake and I don't know why. And you need to break that association. So by not staying in bed awake too long and only returning when you're sleepy, there's no time limit, gradually your brain will relearn this association that you had as a child, that every time you get into bed, you always fall asleep. And so the analogy here would be, you know, we would never sit at a dinner table waiting to get hungry. So why would we lie in bed waiting to get sleepy? And the answer is that we shouldn't.
Makes total sense.
The fifth one is something we've already spoken about, which is try to avoid caffeine in the afternoon and evening and just be mindful of your alcohol. And the final one is have some kind of a wind down routine in the evening before you go to bed. Many of us think that sleep is like a light switch, that as soon as we get into bed, we should immediately be able to fall asleep. And sleep is not like that. Sleep is much more like trying to land a plane. It gradually takes time for you to come down and land onto that nice, secure surface. So do whatever works for you. Light stretches, meditation, reading a book, having a hot bath or a shower, um, any one of these things, sort of massaging, sort of putting lotions on or cream, just something that's a routine. In other words, it's a ritual. And then whatever works and relaxes you, disengages you from email and social media, and do that every night. And that's the final piece of advice. The last thing I would say is, these are tips for better sleep. But if you have a sleep disorder like insomnia or sleep apnea, which is heavy snoring, none of this is going to work. And it would be like the equivalent of me as an athletic coach, as an Olympic coach, giving you lots of tips to improve your performance. But if you have a broken ankle, none of those tips are going to help you. We've got to fix your broken ankle by going to a doctor.
Right.
Have a sleep disorder, please go and see a doctor.
So what if you want to go and see you?
So my sleep center here at the University of California, Berkeley, is a research center where we do both clinical and sleep research. But I also have several startup companies, and one of them we've just launched, which is a company called Shuni. This is, you can go to Shuni, it's SHUNI.io. And it is a digital sleep therapy if you have insomnia. And so we have clinically trained sleep therapists, some of the best from places like Stanford University. And you don't have to be in the United States. It's online, it's digital, it's with an actual therapist in video. And we are designed to treat and diagnose insomnia. So people can go and look at that resource if they like, and that's where they can get help. And I'm a co-founder and the chief scientific operator.
Shuni.io. So
that's right.
Tell me how you sleep. When do you go to bed, and how many hours do you sleep?
So I practice what I preach, not because I want to be some advertisement for sleep. It's just because
you believe in it. You believe in it.
Exactly. And it's the reason that, the reason that you take care of your skin and you do all of the, the incredible health work for yourself is not necessarily because, it's part of a business. It's because you know of the scientific and medical importance. And that's why you invest in it. And it's the same way for me with sleep. If you knew everything I knew about sleep, you couldn't think of any better health insurance policy than this thing called an 8-hour sleep opportunity. So for example, in my family, there's a very strong risk of cardiovascular disease, a very strong history. And I don't want to die prematurely. And I also know that sleep is the best form of blood pressure medication that you could ever wish for.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So I sleep for selfish reasons because I'd like to try and stay alive and healthy for as long as I can. And what we know is that the shorter your sleep, the shorter your life. Short sleep predicts all-cause mortality. So I typically give myself about 8 hours and 15 minutes of a sleep opportunity. And usually I get between about 7 hours and 40 minutes to about 8 hours and 5 minutes. That's how much sleep I get. But to get that, what we sometimes don't realize is that to get 7 hours of sleep, you probably need to be in bed at least 8 hours because of how sleep works. And I go to bed at just about the same time every night, and I wake up at the same time every morning. The only time that I won't go to bed at the same time is if I'm not feeling sleepy, then I will resist going to bed because I know I don't want to be in bed awake. And so if I'm not feeling sleepy, as long as I'm not watching television or using my phone or my computer, because when you use a phone and computer, it's so activating and alerting that it's almost like a mute button on your television. It hits the mute signal of sleepiness and you think, well, I'm not sleepy. But if the power went out and you couldn't use your phone, you would realize, gosh, I am sleepy. It's just these devices make me awake. But if I'm not using technology, it's dim light, and I still don't feel sleepy, then I'll try to resist. I'll wait for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But that's my sleep routine, and it's selfish just because I don't want to die or have disease and sickness any earlier than is necessary.
I follow a total anti-inflammatory lifestyle if I can. Of course, when you travel and have jet lag and, you can't follow a certain diet, but especially during quarantine, when we had to be in lockdown, I went to bed mostly with my 5-year-old. Like at 8 or 8:30, I had the best sleep for 4 months, which was great.
Yeah.
And following the anti-inflammatory diet and trying to disconnect from devices and news, which can also disrupt your sleep because you're getting so nervous and get anxiety about the situation going on. I think this is also something. Lots of people are on the TV watching news and until late, also from bed, obviously. But I feel also, in the bedroom there shouldn't be like an Apple TV on Wi-Fi radiation all the time. There shouldn't be your phone charging in your room. My kid, my 24-year-old, I taught her from the beginning, the phone needs to be in the kitchen. It can't be in your bedroom. It's really bad for you. And, switch the TV light off, even the little blue light, when you go to hotel rooms, everything is on, it's like super light in the room, and this disturbs your sleep. And I think, really making sure to have this sleep. And as you said, and that's why I'm so obsessed also with you, because, and I wanted to have a little bit the scientific stamp on it, what I'm saying all the time, because I also don't want to preach to people. I just really like to assure people that, their health could be so much better. And especially right now in these situations, what's going on, you want to be your healthiest yourself in order to stay alive. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point. And, technology, I understand, it brings us lots of wonderful benefits, but the invasion of technology into the bedroom has been a problem. And so if you can try to leave your technology outside of it, also try not to check your technology the first thing when you wake up in the morning. That's what most people do. They reach.
Oh, most people do that, and I'm guilty too. I'm guilty. So why do we not check it?
Well, the reason is because it's something called anticipatory anxiety, and the extreme version of this is: have you ever had to wake up early to catch a flight or to go to a job interview, and you know that night of sleep, it's not very deep, it's very fitful.
No, because you have it in your brain already.
Exactly,
you have to go. You're basically already up for the flight. You don't even have to. Yes,
that's right, because you're anticipating something that's anxiety. Now, when we do this with our phones every day, we wake up and we swipe right, and then this wave of anxiety, this tsunami of anxiety comes flooding into our brain. And what you do is you train your brain every day to expect this wave of anxiety. So every time you go to bed at night, your brain is now thinking, well, when we wake up the next morning, it's the trigger of anxiety. It happens every time. And so it's kind of like a lower level example of the plane or the job interview. Right. And therefore the quality of your sleep cannot be as deep. So to do the experiment, if you really have to take technology into your bedroom and use your phone, the first rule is that you can only use your phone in your bedroom at night if you're standing up. And after a while, people just get tired of standing up and they say, all right, okay, that's the first rule. The second rule is try for a 1-week experiment not to check your phone until after you've brushed your teeth in the morning. And then you can check it. And just give it 5 minutes.
I would do that.
Try to do a second experiment where you extend it and you say, I'm not going to check my phone until after I've made my cup of coffee. So I wait until I've made my coffee, and my treat, my reward, is that now I can check my phone. And just keep trying to extend the time. And therefore, you don't have that weight of anxiety right there in the morning, which can disrupt your sleep. Does that
And
sort
this
of
probably creates insomnia, right? This anxiety.
Yes, anxiety is we believe it's one of the principal causes of insomnia. And in fact, what seems to happen, the current mechanism that we think for most insomnia, or not all of it, but a lot of it, is that your fight or flight nervous system within the body, triggered by anxiety in the mind, will prevent you from getting good sleep. Because if you have a fight or flight nervous system activity, it's almost impossible to fall asleep. And I know people here, you know, these very busy people, and they'll tell me, you know, I get into bed and I know I'm tired, I'm really tired, but I'm so wired that I can't fall asleep. And it's what we call the tired and wired phenomenon, where your nervous system is just too activated in this fight or flight branch. So you have insomnia, even though you're desperately tired. And so anxiety is one of the principal triggers of insomnia, but it also works both ways. Recently, we just published a paper that said, even if you're not anxious, if we disrupt your sleep or we deprive you of sleep, we can trigger anxiety the next day. So anxiety can disrupt sleep, but sleep
the other way around
can create anxiety. It's a two-way street, and the traffic flows in both directions.
And if someone has insomnia, they can come to Shuni.
That's right. If they have problems with insomnia, they can go
and
to
this
their own doctor.
will help, right?
Yeah, so it's usually somewhere between a 4 to 6 week program where you have a session with a therapist. It's up to you. It's up to your timing, but there's usually 5 to 6 sessions with a therapist. Then there's lots of digital technology check-ins that will help track you, and they'll see how you're doing. But it doesn't need to be Shuni. It can also
no.
be,
I want to send you a few people.
But
yeah, I want to send you. Thank you so much for your time. This is incredible. I hope I get way more opportunities to talk to you, but also maybe to meet you, come and visit you, and learn even more. It's fascinating and amazing, and it just underpins the real need for enough sleep. And I will definitely, although I'm pretty good, I'm really good sleeper, I will still try to make it even better.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for the work that you do and bringing, you know, real science to the forefront of healthcare and, you know, the nurturing of people. I think it's so important to have that message where science is the first place from which you begin. It's the foundation. And I try to do the same thing with sleep. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Education is so important. Everyone out there is craving education, and you know, if you understand something, then you also have way more power to act on it. So I thank you so much. I know how busy you are.
You're very welcome.
It's a real honor to have you here. Thank you so much.
And I look forward to meeting
I see you soon.
Both again and also in person at some point when hopefully all of this is over. And thank you again for this opportunity to connect.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye. Bye.